Just before we start, I'd just like to introduce Dimitri Stockart, who's the MC for today, and he actually reviewed the presentation a couple of weeks ago, so thank you very much for that, Dimitri. So just a quick show of hands, who's got a title of either owner or founder or CEO of a company? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, and a question for everyone, who's either been part of a company that's acquired another company or been acquired by another company? Show of hands. Okay, and for those people, was that experience an overwhelmingly pleasant one? Show of hands. Or was it a bit of a disaster? Okay, very interesting. Well, this presentation is going to talk about how you can maximize your chances of success and minimize your chances of disaster. So I say, don't just crunch the numbers. Your business exit strategy is more than just that. But of course, the numbers are important. You know, preparing your finances, being able to show growth and profitability, having a compelling future vision and a strategy to deliver it, standard operating procedures, a sales engine, how you look after your accounts and existing customers, all that's important. But they're really just pay-to-play items that a potential buyer is going to be interested in seeing before he buys your company. But they're not really the root cause of failure of M&A integration. So if you're going to secure your legacy, you're going to have to focus on the root causes of those failures. And a good place to start is why. Why do you want to sell your company? So I've put some common reasons for owners to sell. You know, you've worked hard all your life, you want an exit, you want to retire, you don't want to work until you drop, you've got no succession plan in place, or you've got a great vision of what you want to do, but you need some money to realize that vision, or like a few companies, you might be under financial distress. But they're all good reasons for you as an owner, but they're not going to be compelling reasons for your employees and your customers. So you've got to come up with a message for your customers and employers that makes sense to them, because people will accept the disruption and sometimes the chaos of a company integration if they agree that if they have a sense that change is necessary and they agree that change is going to solve those problems. So you have to come up with a message for why it's good news for them. And here's a little mind map. I mean, it's with some of the reasons, so you can see down the bottom there, why is this acquisition good news for your customers? You know, maybe you'll be able to offer them some new service offerings. Maybe there'll be greater technology integration, access for new innovation, an additional talent pool. So you've got to find out what's a good reason for your customers, and then for your employees, they might get the opportunity to work with some new customers. Opportunities for learning and growth are always good for your employees. Exposure to new tools and technology, experiencing new ways of working, better ways of working maybe, and with career progression. So whatever it is, you've got to think about that messaging for your key stakeholders.
Office room.
Sorry, just before I go into that, if you don't have that compelling message, this is what your employees are going to hear when you tell them you're selling your company.
Office rule number 5. Sack your staff.
There's good news and bad news. The bad news is some of you will lose your jobs. Yeah. No, I know. Gutting. The good news is I've been promoted. So you're still thinking about the bad news, aren't you?
Watch it.
Yep, they're still thinking about the bad news. And that's, you know, when you make that announcement, unless you have that compelling vision of why you're doing it, all they're going to think about is the bad news, real or imaginary. So, apart from having that compelling vision for the deal, you have to also think about what's so special about your company. The acquiring company might be buying it for the rapid growth, the revenue, the customers. Maybe you've got some technology. Maybe you're in a geographical location that they want to be present in. But there are some gems that might get overlooked, and you as the owner of the selling company, You've got to actually identify that and look after that. So here are some examples. So when I sold my company to Berlitz, we had developed a system of customer care. And that was developed because we were losing customers, and I was finding out about it when the customer was walking. It was too late to do anything about it. I thought, anybody who's sold knows how difficult it is to find a customer and how easy it is to lose them, so I'd had enough. So we came up with a system where customer complaints, as soon as they were made, were entered into the system. And that generated an email which went a distribution list, which included me, so I knew there was a complaint. And then the complaint was tracked through the corrective action, sorted out the immediate problem, the preventative action, which was there to prevent that same mistake, same complaint occurring again, and then it developed into a continual improvement process. And that was a really cool system. Berlitz weren't interested in it. At least they didn't try to kill it off, but they just let me run it. And then Bowen bought Berlitz, and they said, hey, that's cool. We might do something ourselves, create something ourselves, because not invented here. But before they could do that, Lionbridge bought Bowen, and then Lionbridge looked at it and said, this is brilliant, we're going to roll this out worldwide, and to my surprise and pleasure, they did. So that was an example of something that was bought by Berlitz, but was only when Lionbridge acquired it that it was actually rolled out to its full potential. Another example might be a brilliant employee onboarding process. You'll find this with smaller companies that have home workers distributed, so people working from home all over the country, all over the world. And I've seen examples of companies, smaller companies, that had brilliant onboarding process. They would spend about 2 weeks dedicated time for a new employee. How do you make someone who's sitting at home somewhere in Chicago feel part of a global company, right? Well, the onboarding process can do that. And that onboarding process would start with the values. Say, here's what we stand for. Here's the behaviors we expect. Here's how we expect you to collaborate with your colleagues, how you treat them, how you handle complaints with customers. And it goes through the strategy. Here's what the strategy is. Here's how your job helps deliver that strategy. Here's our culture. And maybe the bigger company coming in, especially if they're office-based, their onboarding process for new employees might be, and I'm exaggerating slightly, welcome to the company, there's your desk, there's your laptop, get working, right? So if you're part of the smaller company and you're expected, you've been taken over by this larger company, you might not want the cultural regression of having to have a worse onboarding process or a worse customer complaint process. So some other examples, employee training, excellent communication practices. Again, just because the bigger company is buying you, doesn't mean to say that they've got communication sussed, because they might not. And another thing, your customers might be at risk, but surely no acquiring company is going to jeopardize your customers. Well, not deliberately, but maybe inadvertently. So another example, so my company to Berlitz had a couple of really good e-learning customers and one large telecom customers, which was just in development stage. And after the deal was done, my colleagues in Dublin said, hey, we're taking these accounts to Ireland. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, we're taking it to Ireland. I said, what? And they said, yeah. I said, well, hold on a minute, because I had part of the deal was an earn-out, so it was an upfront consideration for the company, but then it was an earn-out. I said, well, that revenue is going towards my earn-out. Don't worry, it will still count towards your earn-out. I said, well, the revenue projections that I made for those accounts were based on me and my teams running it, not somebody else who doesn't know these accounts running it. They went, don't worry, Paul, it'll be fine. The decision's made. So what could I do? Well, I had to tell the customer, because it was my customer. I had a great relationship with the customer. And when I told them all the reasons why that was going to be good news for him. He didn't share that optimistic outlook at all. So he phoned the executive, one of the executives, made the decision and told them what would happen if that account was moved to Dublin. So that decision was reversed, and that was good for the customer. It was good for me and my teams, and it was good for the company because we grew those accounts tremendously. So there's some of the things you have to think about even after the deal is done. So what's so special about your company? So you're not just selling your business, you're selling your people and your customers too. I've talked about your customers. Well, your employees, you know, you have to work out who you want to keep, who owns the customer relationships, because if you take away their customers, you're going to have a compelling business reason for doing that, and you're going to have to have something else you give them in return, or else you're going to lose them. And one of the things that people often lose quickly is their job title. Come out with a new organization chart 2 days after the announcement is made. Well, that's a declaration of civil war. If you want to have infighting and an exodus for the door, then that's a great way to do it. So I would say hold on with the org chart, because you're going to lose some people. So this is a company life cycle. I like it because, whatever company you work on just now, it's going to be somewhere on this cycle, right? So anyone here who's a business owner, you had a business idea that's dreaming the dream. Then you had to get some funding, maybe persuade some people to join you, find those all-important paying customers to get the venture off the ground. And that stage 2, launching the venture, is quite exciting. Some people just love that, startup entrepreneurial spirit. Communication's easy. You just pick, you're probably in the same room in the same office as the owner and founder. Everybody mucks in, does whatever has to be done to keep the business going. Some people love that chaos, and some people don't. Some people will only join once it's grown to a size where that kind of entrepreneurial setup will no longer function. And that's when you start to get organized. And what that means is all the things that you as an owner maybe has been doing, you have to hire people who have got expertise in doing that. So you'll hire a sales manager, an ops manager, IT, research and development, finance manager, HR manager. So it becomes a proper company with a proper org chart, with roles and responsibilities and job descriptions and standard operating procedures. And so some people don't like that move, and so you'll lose some people, but you'll be able to bring some people in. So there's no point in just coming out with the org chart a couple of days after the deal is done, because you'll lose more people than you want. Instead, you've got to wait, give it time until you know who's staying, who's going, who wants to stay, who you want to stay, who you want to go. And then, a few months later, you can come up with that org chart for the new company. So I'm all for moving fast, but, not moving recklessly fast, moving fast with clarity based on a plan. And the plan should focus on these 7 areas. These are the root causes of why deals. For those of you that said you had a bad experience with mergers and acquisition, when you think about it, you'll probably find one or more of these reasons were behind that. So no compelling executive vision of why we're doing this, no real sense of urgency, poor, sometimes terrible communication. You're not identify the key value drivers of the deal. You don't engage the whole organization. There's no focus in integrating core processes, and you don't understand how to change culture. So what is the plan? The plan is to look at those 7 areas, and then you can do a readiness assessment during due diligence. So, and that looking at the 7 areas and say, which ones are we well prepared for? Which ones are blind spots? Which ones do we need to do some work on? And then based on that outcome of that report, then you can create a plan, an implementation plan, which is going to be ready as soon as you make the announcement. The plan is in place and you can start to execute it. And some of the things you might have a communication matrix. So you've got different stakeholders, and they need different content at different frequencies, different timescales, different channels, and each of those channels will have different owners. So you can see, this is just to give you an idea of the amount of work and preparation you need to do for a proper communication plan about a sale or an acquisition. And then you've got that vision of what the deal is about. So you've got to really focus on the things that are going to deliver the value of your deal. There's lots of things you could do. There's lots of things people will want you to do, but you've got to focus on the things that are going to have a high merger value, a high probability of success in the first 6 to 9 months. And that's your quick wins. And then there might be some big bets, which if they if you pull off the bet, they're going to deliver a lot of value, but there's a big risk that they might not happen. So you might not want to do that in year one. And then there's lots of thankless tasks which look good on paper, but when you actually start to do them or to analyze them, you find out they're not going to deliver much value, and they're just going to take resources which could be put onto the quick wins. So when you look at the quick wins, then you want to organize them into teams, and those teams should be made up of the buying company and the selling company. So that helps with that important teamwork and collaboration. And then the last one is culture change. Well, you know, some people think culture is hippy-dippy nonsense, and some people think it's, you know, it's really difficult, so difficult, they're scared of looking at it. But everybody in this room knows what culture is. If you've ever worked for a company with a toxic culture, you know it exactly. You think, bloody hell, why did I join this company? And likewise, if you've joined a company with a great culture where, you know, there's a real buzz about the place, people support each other, they're confident in making decisions, they speak their mind, they're not scared of asking for help, everybody knows what the strategy is and what their role is in it, then you know that. You can just feel it. And if, like me, you've had the privilege of working in sales for so long, I mean, I've visited over 250 customers in 45 countries, and that gives you a sense of culture. You get, you know, you can walk into a company, you get a good idea in short order what kind of culture is you're dealing with. And that's important because culture will determine if the value of the deal is going to be realized. So I like this iceberg metaphor where you've got the visible culture, the way we say things get done, which is your mission, vision, strategy, your org charts, your policies, procedures. And then below the waterline, where people can't see it, is the way things really get done, the attitudes and beliefs of your employees, you know, the way they treat each other, what they say about their customers, things like that. And in well-functioning companies, there's not a huge difference between above the waterline and below. In dysfunctioning companies, it's a big difference. So you have to understand what type of culture you're dealing with. This is another way of looking at it. So you've got power and structure, where, you know, authority is centralized and then power is more and more devolved. So you've got the red, which is very command and control. The orange culture, which is power is shared. The green one, where values and purpose are set core to the company. And then the last one, where power is shared, you get a lot of self-management teams. So it's not as if, you know, red, bad, teal is great. What it is, there's a time and a place for telling people what to do, but it's not every time and it's not every place. So what you'll find is those cultures are nested within one and the same company. But what happens is in time of crisis and trouble, you tend to resort towards a command and control. And so if there's one thing to take away from this slide is that, you know, integrating two companies is very complex and very disruptive. So just barking orders at people, telling people what to do is not going to work. What works better is saying, hi guys, here's the vision for the deal, here's where we want to get to, but we don't know all the answers. But if with your help, we're going to get there. And we're going to need your help to get there. That's a much better approach to getting people involved and helping to make it happen. So last one on culture, I like this slide because it's culture change on a slide where you've got a surviving organization and a thriving organization. Just 3 changes. So in the surviving, strategy is the preserve of the executive team. People in the company don't know what the strategy is. If you ask them, they'll say, I don't know. Or they might say, that's not my job to know. That's the executive team's role. In the thriving organization, everybody knows what the strategy is. Everybody can tell you what it is and how their job helps deliver that. And that's because they're involved in formulating the strategy, or at least the objectives for 2024 objectives. They'll have been involved in that. So that's one change. The next change number 2, is going from firefighting to fire prevention. Firefighting is you get a complaint, you fix it, customer's happy. What's the problem? Well, the problem is you're going to get those complaints again. The customer's is tired having the same complaints. Your employees are fed up having to rework things over and over again, and you'll notice it on your bottom line. So instead of that, you can have fire prevention, which is a system of continual improvement, and things just work the way they should. And the last change is you go from everyone having one job, follow the process, to having two jobs, follow the process and improve the process. Because the people running the processes know what works and what doesn't, and they'll be able to improve it based on triggers like customer complaints, or just by looking at it or doing some self-assessment themselves. So when should you start to prepare? So I said you should start as early as possible in the M&A process, maybe a letter of intent, certainly during due diligence, because integration is consistently forgotten about until it's too late. Normally the deal's done, you make the announcement and they say, okay, well, what's the plan for integration? It's already too late, the damage is done. So I would say that, if you know you're going to sell your company, why wait that long? Why, because the problems that those 7 areas, they're problems you're dealing with just now. It's just that they're chronic, they're not acute. During integration, they become acute because the stakes are so high and everything is changing at the one time. But you could look at those 7 areas just now, and by a series of business maturity workshops, you could come up with some change initiatives for dealing with that, so that those problems are not going to be as acute during the integration stage. And in fact, that could be part of your preparation, and that preparation will make you more attractive to a buyer. So that's and I'm on time. So thank you very much for the attention.